I wanted to just show you guys. You guys may or may not have heard. Obviously, you've heard about the Chinese spy balloon getting shot down. But then shortly after that, for a number of days, a number of other objects were shot down, and they weren't identified, at least to my knowledge. They may have identified some by now. And this discussion about UAPs, UFOs is going to become a greater and greater discussion and more commonplace, just because there are, without question, there is video evidence and other evidence, data, radar data, and those sorts of things about physical objects we can't explain that seem to defy the laws of physics and those sorts of things. And so we've had these discussions before here on Apologia and on Cultish, describing the occultic nature a lot of this, but we need to be ready as Christians not to simply wave our hands and be dismissive to the actual physical evidence, but also be ready to deal with the worldview implications and the clear worldview implications coming from guys like Dr. Stephen Greer, who is one of the popular talking heads in the movement. And so we want to prepare you for it, because it's always loaded up at the front as a scientific discussion, observational evidence, those sorts of things, and then it moves right into the occult. There is no way around at this point having to deal with the actual footage, like, for example, the footage of fighter pilots chasing, objects, glowing orbs, light that appears and darts back and forth, and, not being able to catch these things diving into water and moving under the water the same way they're moving, out in the sky, chasing one and then it disappears and appears like miles and miles away instantaneously on the radar. There's data for that. You can watch it with your eyes. You can listen to the pilots talking about, like, what are these things? They can't catch them. There's no way out of that. However, there is a clear worldview attached to much of this, whether you get into things like Sitchin and the Anunnaki and Planet X and Nibiru, or if you get into Stephen Greer and you watch his movie, and forgive me, I'm thinking it was called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, or it's just called The Fifth Kind. We did a talk on this before. If you get into that, you'll see the first 15 minutes, I was just saying this to Joy, the first 15 minutes of that film is it's pretty compelling. It's seems scientific, based on observational evidence, those sorts of things, things that comport with the Christian worldview, right? Logic, reason, integrity, observational evidence, that kind of stuff. And then it just switches on a dime, just doop, turns right away after the first 15 minutes or so, and it goes right into occultism. I mean, it's just straight occultism, communication with spirits, transcendental meditation, remote viewing, non-locality, all of the standard fare, new age and occultic stuff, even that's made its way into era 3 medicine. And, we did a thing years ago on a local chiropractic practitioner that was practicing KST, which is essentially occultism and chiropractic care, where you're using techniques like dowsing techniques and getting binary responses, same stuff you would use with the pendulum years ago was being done in a local chiropractic clinic. And it's all standard fare new age occultism and communication with spirits. And Stephen Greer was just on the Sean Ryan show, and we love
yes,
the Sean Ryan show. And so anyway, I watched it last night. It's about 2.5 hours long. And sure enough, just like Dr. Stephen Greer's show, his movie on The Fifth Kind, making contact with these beings through meditation and seances and all the rest, just like the show, the movie, the Sean Ryan podcast starts off with 2 hours of the science and the witnesses and the evidence and all this stuff. And then it just, boom, turns to this discussion about straight occultism. And, look, this is not a new thing. All right. Communication with spirits, transcendental meditation, remote viewing, all this stuff. This stuff is as old as the hills. And, this stuff has been around forever, and these techniques and this kind of seances and sorcery and trances, it's very popular. Man, is it so popular today. It's becoming more and more popular. DMT, trips, ayahuasca, all that stuff, taking substances to get into an altered state of consciousness to communicate with the other side. That's a big popular discussion right now. Joe Rogan's had the discussion a bunch, so dudes are getting into that. Guys are taking trips to Mexico and other places to do like weekend trips, DMT. Yeah. Sean Ryan did it.
Yeah, he did.
Sean Ryan.
He said it changed his life.
Yeah, he said it changed his life, like being able to get to this other realm through the use of psychedelics and then to communicate with the creatures on the other side, all that stuff. And so it's becoming very, very popular. But like I said, it's as old as the hills. And so this is a popular discussion. Stephen Greer fits right into it right now. And so the Sean Ryan show starts with a very scientific, observational evidence, witnesses, all that stuff, and then gets right to, and now here's how you communicate with them. But here's what I want everyone to see. God condemns this practice. Deuteronomy chapter 18, go read it. In God's law, he forbids communication with the dead. He forbids the practices of the nations where they would do this sort of a thing, take substances to communicate with the other side. God forbids spiritism, necromancy, communication with what's on the other side, because here's the reason why. Because what you're going to make contact with isn't what you think. You're going to be making contact with something that you didn't anticipate. And so that's God protects his people. You see it in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. Like when the Apostle Paul talks about the works of the flesh, he even mentions sorceries. That would be in line with that same thing, taking substances, communicating with the other side, spiritism, all that. So Christianity, the biblical worldview, forbids this sort of a thing, and locked right into the center of this with Dr. Stephen Greer is not merely a scientific, observational, what is happening here, let's just look at the evidence, look at the witnesses. It is a clear worldview of how do we communicate with these beings across the universe. You'll hear him mentioning occultism and spiritism and communication with the spirit realm. You'll hear him describing it in a really unique way. He avoids, well, he doesn't completely avoid, like when he talks about non-locality and remote viewing, he's using the standard fare language that you would get from the New Age, but he talks about this practice of communication with beings who are millions of light years away in terms of technology. And so he talks about the technology that he teaches and he engages in to communicate across the universe because we're actually entangled. And this goes back to, the way that we typically describe this. There are two basic worldviews. There's oneism and twoism. Oneism and twoism. Oneism, Peter Jones gave us this. I think it's fantastic. Oneism is essentially the perspective of all the world religions and New Age, whatever they might be. Oneism is that all of us are a part of this one thing, the universe itself. The gods come from that one thing. They come from that as well. They're part of this. They're part of this thing. This universe, the universe, one. We're all one. And so that's the New Age thing. Like we're all one with the universe. You got to learn to make contact with other beings, and we're all one, and the gods are part of this universe, all the rest. There's oneism, and then there's twoism. That's the Christian worldview. The biblical worldview is there's a creator and there's a creation. There's a distinction between the creator and the creation. And so there's the oneism, twoism thing. Now, the way that Dr. Greer describes it in terms of communication and occultism is we can communicate with beings who are millions of light years away because actually we're entangled. We're all entangled. And so your thoughts can communicate across the universe millions of light years away in an instant. And so you just need to learn...
Like a nuclear test.
Yeah. You just need to learn to basically... be able to be, there's non-locality and there's remote viewing. You need to be able to get out of your body into that realm to communicate. And so Greer claims to have had communication with these beings, and he teaches you the technology to be able to communicate across the universe with these beings. And again, I highly encourage you to do it. Go watch Stephen Greer's Fifth Kind documentary, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It switches from, this is all observation and scientific, to it's just straight occultism. Yeah. And that's what he gets into here. It goes from observation and science to, now I want to teach you how to do occultism. And so he promotes his app, and the app teaches you to communicate with spirits.
It's crazy.